It emerges that he was not just any man but a shadowy CIA asset, and now the truth is primed to shatter their carefully constructed lies. The midnight highway lay in a hushed lull, broken only by the distant purr of tires on wet asphalt. In a time when most souls have long retreated indoors, only those with pressing destinies wander these empty lanes. On a murky stretch of Birmingham, Alabama's backroads, a determined black man in his late 30s maneuvers a jet-black SUV, his hands firm on the wheel as if carved from stone. His eyes, as keen as a hawk's, skin the darkness. He's trod this path before, stopped on these lonely roads, questioned and studied. He whispers a silent mantra to himself, striving to remain composed, yet tonight something in the air sings a disquieting warning. Then, as if summoned by fate, flashing lights slice through the gloom, a police cruiser emerges from behind like an unwelcome specter. The siren's cry, a single, piercing wail, carries a message meant to unsettle. He casts a furtive glance at his rearview mirror, exhales sharply, and signals as he gradually eases onto the shoulder. Every action follows protocol to a T. Inside the cruiser, officers Clayton and Reynolds share a knowing glance. He fits the description, Reynolds murmurs, already fumbling for his radio. Clayton offers a sardonic smile. Doesn't matter, let's see what secrets unravel. They step out with measured deliberation. One officer taps a flashlight against his palm before angling it toward the driver's window. The man inside does not flinch. He lowers the window with a practiced calm, hands never leaving the wheel. Evening, officers, what's the trouble? Clayton inquires, voice flat while his eyes betray a judgment already passed. License and registration, he adds. The man's response is as cool as tempered steel. His hand hovers near the glove compartment. Mind if I retrieve them slowly? Reynolds interjects, his hand resting casually on his holster. The SUV's cabin light flickers to life as the man silently extracts his documents and slides them over. Clayton scrutinizes the license. Where are you headed at this hour? He demands. The man's tone remains even, home. Reynolds sweeps his beam over the passenger seat, then drifts his light toward the rear, accusingly, driving too fast back there? The man's eyes betray nothing. In his mind he corrects, that's preposterous, I maintain the speed limit. He knows it, they know it, and so he offers no protest, only silent observation and deliberate listening. Clayton steps back, clicking his tongue, before mounting the vehicle. It is then that the man's eyes betray a subtle, almost imperceptible reaction. A mere twitch. Was there a hidden reason behind that glance? Reynolds' grip tightens on his holster. You resisting? He hisses. The man exhales, a quiet resignation mixed with a spark of defiance. They're not merely seeking grounds for a ticket tonight, they're hunting for something far graver. The night's air is suffocating, clinging to skin and stoking a restless tension. The man exits the SUV with slow, deliberate movements. His hands remain visible, his shoulders squared as if challenging fate itself. He has weathered worse storms, he reminds himself, drawing a steadying breath. Officer Clayton circles him like a prowling predator gauging vulnerable prey, while Reynolds lingers by the driver's open door, his eyes combing the interior as if searching for sins hidden in plain sight. Got anything illegal in the car? Clayton inquires, his tone laced with a saccharine politeness that barely conceals suspicion. No, the man replies, his voice calm yet resolute. You sure? Reynolds jibes under his breath. Mind if we take a peek? And then, the moment arrives. The man is acutely aware of the grim game. Say no and they'll fabricate evidence, say yes and they'll contrive a crime. I don't consent to any search, he states evenly. Clayton clicks his tongue again. See, that's interesting, since we have probable cause. Reynolds leans toward the car, reaching under the driver's seat. His body momentarily obscures the view, but the man catches the slight, calculated jerk of Reynolds' elbow, as if tucking something away into a secret pocket. Reynolds then retracts his hand, now clutching a small bag of white powder between his fingers. His face blooms into a predatory grin, as if he'd just won an unexpected prize. Well, what do we have here? The man's eyes dart from the bag to the officers, his pulse races, not from fear, but from a cold, meticulously calculated fury. He realizes, with mounting clarity, that they have no inkling of whom they've ensnared. Clayton grins as if in on a private joke. Looks like we've got ourselves a little predicament. Reynolds snaps the handcuffs onto him with excessive force. Too tight, but remember, you have the right to remain silent, he intones procedurally, his voice devoid of any real conviction. It sounds more like a mockery. The man's jaw tightens as they shove him against the hood of his SUV. He's been trained for moments like these, moments when his silent strength could disarm them in seconds, though not tonight. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law, their words blur as he fixes his gaze on the planted evidence in Reynolds' grasp. His mind sharpens, already mapping his next move, for what they don't realize is that he is not a disposable target, and they have just made the gravest miscalculation of their lives. They assume this will be an easy conquest, another routine stop of a black man whose words will be dismissed. Yet what they fail to grasp is that the true battle has barely begun, the cold bite of metal cuffs sinking into his wrists as they shove him into the back of the squad car. The door slams shut with finality, echoing like a judge's gavel. He sits, expression unreadable, a fortress of years of training where control over his body, emotions, and instincts is his only shield against utter self-destruction. Outside, officers Clayton and Reynolds exchange a quiet laugh, their job seemingly accomplished, another statistic, another effortless arrest. Reynolds leans against the car, shaking his head. "Guy thought he was slick," he mutters. Clayton snorts, "Yeah, well, he'll soon learn how things really work around here." They dismiss him as just another routine stop, another black man destined never to be believed, another case destined to slip unnoticed beneath the radar. They couldn't be more mistaken. As the SUV drifts away, the man watches the city's neon glow dance on glass, each flicker a silent reminder that with one call he could dismantle their entire operation. But not yet, he must first delve deeper into the murk, to play the role they expect him to play at the station. The process unfolds swiftly, fingerprints, a mugshot, the entire ritual of identification. "Full name," the indifferent officer at the desk asks, barely glancing up. For a moment, he contemplates a lie, a name void of consequence, but then he recalls the true adversary. To utter his real name would ignite alarms in secret corridors unknown to these officers. So, he remains silent. The officer exhales and turns to Clayton. "No ID," Clayton shrugs. Guy refused to provide anything. It is a lazy, unconvincing lie, but in a system predisposed to trust such fabrications over men like him, it matters little. Soon, he is locked in a holding cell, the heavy metal door clanging shut behind him. In that cramped space, other men slump against grimy walls, eyes fixed on the floor, some appear as though they've languished for hours, others for days. A younger inmate with weary eyes peers at him, murmuring, "What did they get you for?" He exhales slowly, knowing that come morning, this very station would have its world upended, but tonight, they slumber easy, oblivious to the storm gathering on the horizon. Inside the packed courtroom, reporters cram into the benches while cameras flash and microphones stand at the ready. A case like this rarely splinters the silence of the headlines, not when it is painted as just another drug bust. Yet something in this narrative had ignited a wildfire. The prosecution stands smugly, led by a district attorney whose career has been forged on delivering harsh sentences. He straightens his tie with a self-satisfied smirk, convinced that victory is already in hand. At the defense table sits the accused, his wrists now free, yet his body remains as composed and still as a monument. He has waited patiently for this day. Officers Clayton and Reynolds, seated a few rows back with arms folded and eyes sharp yet relaxed, appear as if they have nothing to fear. The judge enters, the jury takes their seats, and then the trial commences. The prosecution wastes no time, a rehearsed narrative unfolds time and again. "This is a case about law and order," the DA asserts authoritatively. "These officers did their duty, they removed an illegal substance from the streets, and now," he gestures toward the accused as though pointing to a festering rot, "the defendant wants you to believe he is the victim." The jury listens in measured nods, a few glance at the accused, their expressions inscrutable. Then arrives the so-called evidence, the bag of powder, the officer reports that sound almost identical, as if scripted from the same template, and the body cam footage, regrettably unavailable due to a technical malfunction. A low murmur ripples through the crowd, only to be quickly stifled as the DA presses on, detailing the arrest, the findings, and the man's refusal to identify himself at the station. He believes this refusal seals the defendant's fate. At that moment, the defense rises, a statuesque, unhurried attorney steps forward, one the prosecution never anticipated in a case like this. Without haste, without forceful argument, the attorney lets the room settle before locking eyes with the jury and posing a single, disarming question: "Do you believe in coincidences?" A beat of heavy silence follows, the DA scowls. The attorney then gestures subtly toward the officers, "Because these men would have you believe they did." He smiles, yet no warmth graces his features. The courtroom stiffens, an unseen shift is imminent. And then, what happens next leaves every soul breathless. The tension intensifies, coiling in the charged air. The defense attorney does not raise his voice. He needs no grand declamation when he possesses something mightier than words, irrefutable proof. Advancing to the table, he retrieves a folder and, with deliberate gravity, flips it open. Every eye in the room is riveted. "You heard the prosecution's account," he intones softly. "Now let's examine the facts." Turning to the judge, he states, "Your Honor, we have new evidence that directly contradicts the officer's statements, obtained lawfully and entirely pertinent to this case." The judge, an older man with eyes that miss nothing, leans forward. The attorney nods, then fixes his gaze upon the prosecution. The defense requests that we admit into evidence a series of classified documents, recently declassified by order of a national intelligence agency. A ripple of shock passes through the courtroom, the DA's face contorts in confusion, and for the first time, uncertainty flickers in his eyes. Officers Clayton and Reynolds exchange a glance, their once relaxed posture now cracks ever so slightly. The attorney continues, "These documents unequivocally confirm the accused identity, not as a common criminal, nor as a man smuggling contraband, but as a deep-cover operative for the CIA, immersed in a highly classified domestic intelligence investigation." The room falls into a stunned hush, a few gasps escape, punctuated by whispered "no way-s," and even the jury sits up straighter. The judge narrows his eyes at the folder. "Are you saying the defendant is a federal agent?" he demands. "Yes, Your Honors," comes the measured reply. "And the so-called evidence discovered in his vehicle?" The attorney turns, meeting the officer's eyes squarely. "It was never there from the start." Reynolds shifts uncomfortably in his seat while Clayton's jaw tightens. The attorney presses on, "This was a setup, a meticulously orchestrated frame." The prosecution stammers, "Your Honor, we were not informed," but the judge cuts him off with a raised hand. "I want to see this evidence now." The attorney hands the folder to the bailiff, who promptly delivers it to the bench. The judge peruses the documents, his eyes narrowing before he exhales slowly and declares, "I want to hear from the defendant immediately." At long last, all eyes fix on the accused as he rises, calm, measured, and in total control. The judge gestures, "State your name for the record." After a pregnant silence, the man speaks, "Special Agent Xavier Cole." A collective gasp and a flurry of whispers erupt from the courtroom, reporters scramble to scribble every syllable. The officers stiffen, the DA pales, and with a resounding bang of his gavel, the judge commands order. The murmurs die down, but the atmosphere has transformed irreversibly. Xavier's voice remains unyielding as he continues, "I have operated undercover for the CIA for the past 7 years, specializing in domestic intelligence and investigations into corruption. I was not randomly pulled over that night." Officers Clayton and Reynolds tense visibly, the jury leans in, and even the judge appears momentarily rattled. "I was tracking a string of wrongful arrests tied to you too," he declares, pausing as more gasps ripple through the room. Locking eyes with Clayton and Reynolds, he states, "You were already under federal surveillance, you simply didn't know it." Clayton clenches his fists while Reynolds shifts uncomfortably. Then the defense attorney steps forward once more, "Your Honor, we have additional evidence to submit." With a sweeping gesture, the courtroom doors swing open and a federal agent strides in, a laptop clutched in hand. Placing the device on the evidence table, he deftly clicks a few commands, and the screen bursts to life. All eyes fixate on the video. The body cam footage, the very same footage previously declared malfunctioned, now plays in unbroken clarity, capturing every moment of the traffic stop, the search, and the precise instant Reynolds reached beneath the seat to plant the bag. The courtroom explodes in murmurs and shock, reporters frantically scribble down the unfolding drama. The DA's face twists in disbelief as Clayton lunges forward, "That's faked, sit down, officer." The judge's voice, icy and final, cuts through the chaos. Reynolds sinks into his seat, his pallor betraying the enormity of the revelation. The jury, now visibly swayed, needs no further convincing, but the trial is far from over, for consequences loom. In the ensuing pandemonium, the courtroom morphs into a battleground of whispers and urgent exchanges. The prosecution appears as a sinking ship, and the two officers, faces resigned, seem to acknowledge their impending fate. The judge stands resolute, "Bailiff, take officers Clayton and Reynolds into custody pending further investigation." Clayton jolts to his feet, desperation cracking his voice. This is a setup. The bailiff grips his arm firmly. Reynolds offers no resistance, his face is blank and hollow, fully aware of his doomed predicament. The jury watches silently as they are led away in cuffs, the same fate met by countless others before them. Xavier remains unmoved, neither smirking nor gloating, only observing as the DA scrambles to salvage remnants of his case. Your Honor, we were not informed, the DA begins, but the judge cuts him off sharply. Then you failed in your duty. Turning to Xavier, the judge intones, Agent Cole, you are free to go. This case is dismissed with prejudice. The words reverberate with finality, marking the end of one chapter even as the battle beyond the courthouse looms. Outside, the courthouse steps teem with reporters, the air alive with flashing cameras and staccato bursts of microphone chatter. Xavier steps out, flanked by his attorney, into a swirl of questions. Agent Cole, what now? What of the past cases these officers touched? How deep does this corruption run? Xavier pauses, then faces the assembly with a steady gaze. This isn't just about me, he says evenly. It's about every person wrongfully confined because no one would believe their truth. And now, we are unearthing every dark corner of this corruption. Reporters clamor to capture every word as it becomes clear that this case has cracked open a far larger scandal. Though the trial may have ended, the true fight has only just begun. In the weeks that follow, every case connected to Clayton and Reynolds is re-examined, dozens of convictions are overturned, and the voices of those long silenced finally resound. The department finds itself under federal scrutiny, the DA is forced to resign, and the city reels from the explosive truth. For Xavier Cole, however, it was never about vengeance. One quiet night, as he stood outside the courthouse gazing past the glare of cameras and the frenzy of breaking headlines, a young man approached him, nervous, hesitant. They locked me up on bogus charges too, the youth whispered, barely audible. Xavier met his gaze steadily. They do now, he replied, his tone measured. That's the enduring power of truth. You can bury it, contort it, or confine it, but you cannot erase it forever. And when it finally surfaces, it transforms everything. Your voice matters. Your rights matter. If you believe in justice, if you believe in truth, let this story be known. Let the world witness what happens when corruption is exposed. And as the echoes of his words fade into the night, one thing is undeniable, the revelation has only sparked the beginning of a revolution that will shake the very foundations of the system.